So welcome to this, the first of the webinars from the Consultants Network supporting the EAA's award submission process. And the aim of this webinar is really to get some people together who have lots of experience in the field of writing and submitting successful awards, and give some tips and pass on ideas to help make your submissions to the awards have a better chance of being successful, of getting to the finalist stage and then hopefully going on and winning. I'm joined today by three experts from this area. I've got Heather Barnett, who is an accomplished writing expert, copywriter. I've got Tim Burnett, who is a long-term associate of the EAA and works now in the marketing support consultancy role, and Geoff Chapman, who again has got a long association with the EAA and works in the sort of strategy and business development areas of the space. And I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, because they'll do a much better job than I just did, and then we're going to dive into four areas of things that you need to consider when you're writing and submitting awards. We're going to talk a little bit about why you should enter in the first place, and which categories to choose. We're going to talk about planning your submission, which is a really important thing in terms of understanding how you're going to approach the award submission piece. Then we're going to talk a little bit about writing the actual submission and making that as strong as it can be. And then in the case of the e-assessment awards, we also have the opportunity, or you have the opportunity, to give a short presentation that backs up your written submission. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how to make that as strong as possible as well. So that's what we're going to try and cover in the next 30 or so minutes. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over to my colleagues so they can introduce themselves. And Heather, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, thank you. So I'm Heather Barnett. I'm a copywriter. I've worked in business-to-business marketing for about 20 years. So for 6 of those, I was head of marketing at RM Results, which is an e-assessment technology provider. I now work freelance as a copywriter, so with various different clients. And I write things like articles, web pages, research reports, case studies, and funnily enough, award entries. So I hope I can give some expertise from that side. I've also been an awards judge for a marketing awards organisation, so hopefully can see things from both sides.
Brilliant, thank you, Heather. Tim, do you want to go next?
Yes, so my name is Tim Burnett. I'm a consultant working in the marketing space. I'm also a board member for the Assessment Association as well. And I've been working in the assessment space for going on nearly 20 years as well, really. And it's kind of, I suppose my role has kind of drifted around, as you do, kind of finding different opportunities and niches where your talents lie. At the moment, a lot of my work revolves around marketing consultancy, a lot of it revolving in the area of technical consultancy, as well as website development, copyright, SEO, and all the other aspects of digital marketing. So that's me.
Fantastic, thanks, Tim. And Geoff?
Hello, I'm Geoff Chapman. I help investment teams, solution providers, and exam owners who specialise in the digital exam and assessment sector. The 3 main areas I look at, I often help founders. Since 2020, I've founded, stayed and exited from a number of edtech businesses. I also provide advisory, so advising on buy and sell sides for edtech transactions. So that can involve deal scouting, due diligence, deep market research and funding. And I also help build and deploy transaction teams. And third and finally, I enjoy mentoring startups and scale-ups on strategy, market entry, capital events and exits. So I'm interested in those founders and people who really want to get into the awards for the first time, perhaps, and not sure what to do, what that looks like in terms of planning, and hopefully I can bring some of that experience to bear.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Geoff. And then I suppose finally, from my perspective, so I've been in this in the e-assessment space now for nearly 35 years, and I've been associated with the e-assessment association both as chair and an interim CEO for over 11 years. And I've been a judge on the e-assessment awards in previous years, something that I always really like doing because it gives you such great insight into what's going on around the sector, and some fantastic and brilliant ideas that brings. I work as a consultant, both on the business development strategy side for technology companies, but more now than anything, working with awarding organisations in helping them procure and utilise technology in assessment to its maximum effect. So that's a little bit about me as well. So I guess we should get on with talking about some tips and ideas around how to help you make the best of your submissions to this year's awards. I think the logical place to start is to talk a little bit about why enter in the first place, what that can bring, the benefits, the challenges that brings to things you've got to think about, and getting the category choice right. And we're each going to take an area, because we've each got a little bit of expertise, I think, in strengthen that expertise in particular areas. So for this area, Tim is going to lead us through. So Tim, over to you on why enter and which categories to choose.
Excellent, thank you, Matt. So I'm going to give you a kind of a bit of a backstory for myself. When you talk about awards, I must admit it was never really kind of big, high on my stack of things to do when I was in charge of marketing for the SPAS guys. And one of the main reasons for that is it always seemed such a risk in terms of going for it. What's going to be what's going to happen if we win it? What's going to happen if we don't win it? How much investment is this going to take? The time it's going to take? Not so much the cost with these things, because then they're never really that expensive to enter. But it does take some time to pull together your story, to put together a good, kind of good tale really to tell about the work that you've done and why you should win that particular award. And it was my colleagues really that did a lot of convincing of me that it's an area that we should go down, and I'm quite pleased they did, really, because I think one of the first things that you need to just set aside is that fear of not winning the awards, because there's a whole lot to be gained from going down this process in the first place. Case studies are fantastic ways in which you could tell the stories of the work that you've done, the achievements that you've made, the difference the impact that you've made on society and education. And by entering an award, it gives you a focus to pull together one of those case studies. What sometimes happens is that, you have an idea for a case study, and it drifts a little bit because there's no kind of time frame or structure to it, and sometimes they may get kind of pushed down the pile. But with an award, there's obviously a structure that you need to follow in terms of the timelines, etc. So it just helps you focus and get the idea together of, okay, we're going to go for this. We need to pull together a case study. We need to have these conversations. It gives you a good inroad to open up the conversations with your customers or your contacts, your partners that have been involved in there. So I would set aside that kind of fear and go for it anyway, just with the mindset that it's a good idea to pull together that case study. There's obviously, the best time to win an award was, last year for the EAA ones, because you could be marketing and talking about it now. But the second best time to go for it is now. So, if you've not done one or you've never actually done that, then I would suggest you strongly go for it. And you might not necessarily win the first time round. You're going to learn a lot from the process. You're going to learn a lot about the particular awards, because every single awards category and process is very different in the way that they run. I'm quite proud of the EAA awards and the structure that we have, the judges that are involved. My kind of role last year was to manage the actual awards process. So I was looking after the judges and talking to them and engaging with them as they kind of explored what some of the challenges they were having, or the just asking for my advice as to who should go forward, or any kind of questions or processes that need to be added in there. So it was great to be involved in that process and kind of oversee it, and it gave me a great broad oversight of some of the trips and falls that people have along the way. And I think one of the big ones is, obviously, once they've made that decision to submit, is getting the category right. And this is important because you need to make sure that your project and your the kind of thing that you're working towards fits neatly with one of the categories that's available. And there's lots of different choice to be had, and there's different ways in which you could approach your project. So don't necessarily just think, okay, we used a bit of technology, let's go for the innovation one. Just think about the kind of wider context of how the project has worked. It could be that formative might be a better option, or summative, or something along those lines. There might be something that's different within your project. So make sure you read the category descriptions and kind of get it right. You can go for multiple categories potentially, but sometimes that can draw your focus away, and you end up maybe supplying one good submission and then a couple of weak submissions that are just wasted anyway. So unless you've got the energy and resource to support that, then I would suggest just maybe going for one category and getting the right category in the first place. So once you've kind of thought through that, think about the chances of success within that category. What is it that you need to really get across? And Heather and Geoff and Matt will give more information about this as you go down, but just think about how are we going to win this with the story that we're going to be involved? Who could we bring into this that could help us tell this story? Because the more real life experiences you're able to inlay with this and not make it a sales presentation, etc., then it's going to be so much better. So think about your approach, think about your time, think about your planning, and Geoff's going to kind of give you more details on the planning side of things. But once you've made that decision, just really start to pull your team together and focus on what it is you're going to go for, and really go for it. Really put that time and effort in, and it will be so worthwhile, even if you don't get selected or anything. Don't worry about that. It's just a job of getting that submission together and telling that really good story. I think, Geoff, you're going to tell us now a bit about kind of planning side, aren't you?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. That was a really great overview. It's down to the old adage, the 5 Ps, if you like. Your proper planning prevents poor performance. The very first thing you got to think of is resourcing and budgets. So there is a fee to enter the EA Awards. So first thing you got to do, raise your purchase order or rattle the petty cash tin. There is a small fee to enter, and we'll talk about it in a second. The amount will depend on when you submit and the number of entries that you submit. So remember to get your budget holders' permission first. Now, the deadline, first of all, get your whatever you use to plan your projects, whether that's a simple Excel spreadsheet or a piece of software like Monday.com or whatever it is, and plot these dates in the diary. So early submission is the 11th of February, and that'll cost you £30 per entry. The standard deadline is 18th of February, and there's a cost of £70 for that. And for those of you who like to do everything lastminute.com, 25th of February, and that's £140. So that'll give you an idea in terms of, we'd really like to see those entries come in as early as possible. Now, in terms of the talents, the team, this is the third element of the planning. Make sure you secure the talents and the time of a project planner, a submission writer, and a presenter. So there are 3 roles: planner, writer, presenter. Now, for goodness sake, try and not include the salespeople. We know how fizzy they are. We know how wonderful they are to get involved with things like this, but our judging panel really don't like being sold to. So use that energy if you can, but please, the panel are not keen on being sold to. The next stage is getting the fit. I know Tim's alluded to this. Check the project submission fits the category and the criteria. So both things, the criteria and the category. So you need to plan to do this before, during, and after you write the submission. If you try and copy paste a submission, anything that's in the wrong category is going to be very easily spotted by the panel. And again, I've similar to everybody on the call, I've judged these awards in the past, and they're very easy to spot where somebody's just got a generic case study and they've dropped in the copy. Our panel will score that accordingly. So please make sure that it does fit the criteria and fits the category. I think what's really central to the awards is the customer. So having that dialogue, being comfortable in asking the customer or stakeholder to provide a written customer quote, and give them a choice of perhaps 3 to choose from. Get your writer to spin up 3 quotes, and also ask for the customer's commitment to a short video. Your writer can provide, say, a 30-second video script. So that means that the customer can just shoot the video themselves with the phone when they've got a spare moment. Now that video, that 30-second video, is your backup. Now, the panel prefers to see the customer or the stakeholder on your actual presentation, your video presentation, but it's always good to have that 30 seconds as a backup should things go pear-shaped, as we say. And finally, on the planning side of things, support. Now, again, we don't like to see salespeople, no offense to anybody in sales, and we don't like to see any marketing material in there either. Anything to do with technical capability or anything that you're giving out at conferences. External links are okay, but do remember the panel can only formally assess what's in the submission and in the video. Anything else, we're probably not going to be able to see. The panel are very busy people. As much as we'd like to read things about e-assessments, in fact, probably to my detriment, I read too much on that, but we can only formally assess what's in the submission and the video. So those are kind of the 6 or so elements to planning. I think I need to hand over to Heather and talk about writing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so I think everything that I'm about to say probably comes under one banner, which is remember that you're writing for human beings. So there's no robot on the back of this form that's kind of processing your entry and then spitting out an award at the other end. You're having to engage and convince a person just like you and me. So I've summarized this into what I'm calling the 5 S's of good award writing. The first one is succinct. It was going to be concise, but then I realized that would be the 4 S's and the 1 C of award writing, which isn't quite as snappy. Succinct or short. So as I say, you're writing for judges who are just like you and me. They've got day jobs, as Jeff was saying, they're busy people. Maybe they want to make the dinner. They want to find out what's going on in Traitors. So much as they love reading about e-assessment and much as they want to know what makes your program award worthy, they would like to do it in the minimal necessary time. So there's a really nice quote that is often attributed to Mark Twain, where he wrote a letter and he said, "I apologize for writing such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." It's hard to be concise. It is much easier to copy and paste stuff across, but take the time to do it and you will reap the rewards and the judges will thank you for it. So don't repeat yourself across different parts of the submission. As Jeff said, try not to rely on external links. Try and keep everything, if you can, within the form, because the judges might not have time to read external links. So that's number 1, keep succinct. The second S is simple. All of us can only process a small number of messages. So try to think about what are the 2 or 3 key things you really want the judges to take away from your award entry. Focus on those, make sure you're hammering those home throughout the entry, and anything that doesn't support that narrative, try and get rid of it if you can. Read the submission form, obviously, and try to make sure that you are simply responding to the criteria and the questions in that form. The third S is for being specific. Generic information isn't persuasive. So if you say, we made the process more efficient, did you? How did you do that? Why should I believe you? If you say, we cut costs by X% and we improve processing times by X, that is persuasive because you're backing up your claim with facts. And if you can't back up the claim that you're making with facts, I would think twice about putting it in there. So that's number 3, specific. Number 4 is for show, don't tell. So what I mean by that is present the facts in a way that makes them feel impressive. Don't say they're impressive. So we delivered incredible results sounds arrogant, whereas saying these are the results that we delivered and it was against this benchmark or baseline, you leave the judges to infer for themselves, wow, that's really impressive. And that's going to be much more convincing if they've done that work to work that out than if you just tell them that you think it's impressive. Make sure you show, obviously, the educational impact of what your project has done or your program has done as well within that. So the 5th one that we're coming on to is story. So give your entry some kind of coherent flow. Don't just put in a list of isolated facts. We're all hardwired to look for stories and patterns and information, and we all digest information really well when it comes through in a story. So think about what makes the elements of a good story. Think about things like what was at stake, who were the main players, what obstacles did they overcome, and actually that's something that can be quite powerful. So if you're honest about the fact that everything didn't go smoothly from A to Z, because things never really do, actually that will probably persuade the judges that everything else you've put in your award entry is quite credible as well. So what obstacles did you come up with, but then how did you overcome them? How did you win out in the end? So just think about what makes a good story. The best award entries are those that make you want to read on rather than make you think, okay, here's a fact, here's another disconnected fact, here's another disconnected fact. So it's much more likely, I think, to stick in the judge's mind and convince them if you can just think about some kind of flow to what you're writing. And it's just as a sub, it's not a 6S, I'd say it's a 5.5S style, comes under that story heading. Avoid academic terms and jargon, because you'll just lose people if they can't understand what you're saying. The judges will be a mixture of people, so kind of educational, industry professionals and practitioners. And if they don't know the language that you use in your niche, if they don't know the acronyms, they won't understand what you're trying to say. So have the confidence to keep your writing simple. So just to summarize, I want to go back through my 5 S's. Keep it succinct, don't waffle, don't repeat yourself. Keep it simple. People can only process a certain number of messages. So what are your key messages and stick to them? Be specific is the third one. Don't just throw out generic claims. Think about how you're supporting with facts what you're saying. Show, don't tell. So think about how you're presenting the information so that it's persuasive rather than telling people that you're great. 5 is story. So have that flow. Think about what makes it gripping to read. And then underneath that is style. Just keep it simple and try to avoid jargon. So that's my writing tips. I do tend to speak very fast, I have to say, so I'm hoping that maybe this could, like podcasts, you can speed them up and listen to them at 1.5. Maybe my bit could just be slowed down to 0.5 and then people will be able to digest it afterwards. Matt, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Heather. And I suppose sort of the bit I'm going to talk about is how you present when you come to show your submission, or have the opportunity to show your submission, which will happen for those people who are being considered as finalists. So there will already have been a little bit of a process that the judges will have gone through, and so if you get invited to give a presentation, your submission is already doing well, and I think that's always a bit of a boost to the confidence before you get in to do the presentation. I think one of there were a couple of critical things to remember about the presentation. The first is you're only going to have a limited amount of time. So make sure that, as Geoff was saying with the overall submission, you've really planned what you're going to do. And you understand who's going to do what they're going to talk about, and how much time they're going to take to do that. So make sure that you practice your presentation. That's really, really important, to make sure that you're not going to run out of time before you get to the stuff that so and so was going to talk about, which was important. Okay, so make sure you do that. Try not to just simply repeat verbatim what you've put in your written submission, because the judges have already got that. They've already understood that. They might ask you questions about that, because the opportunity sometimes arises for questions. Although I believe this year that may happen offline rather than during your presentation slot. But don't just repeat what you've said already. Try and really focus in on the important bits about I suppose the important bits of where you think your project meets the criterion of the category that you've chosen, and what makes your project really special, what makes it stand out. Because you have to remember that the judges are going to be looking at an awful lot of submissions, and it's very easy for yours to get lost in the background unless it stands out. So the presentation is a fantastic way of just really ramping that up and making sure that it's catching their attention. And don't do that, as several of my colleagues have already said, don't do that by getting showman people standing in front of the camera doing the presentation, the salespeople. Do that by telling stuff that's genuinely interesting, that's going to catch people's attention. So that educational impact bit that Heather just talked about, really important to pull that out. Show that your project actually delivers impact on education, and talk to them about that, because I think that will really catch their attention. Get an educator involved in your presentation. I think that's my biggest tip, is to get an educator to be involved in delivering your presentation, or part delivering it with you, because they carry so much hidden credibility with them as soon as they introduce themselves as a teacher or as an educator or whatever, and make sure that they understand what they're talking about, not just in terms of what you want them to talk about, but also that they really were involved in a meaningful way in the project that you've submitted. Because there's nothing worse in someone who's very obviously trying to make it up as they're going along, or talking about stuff that they didn't really understand. So make sure that you've got someone who's been deeply involved in the project, ideally, who's engaging when they're talking, and obviously a lot of educators are, because that's what they're doing all the time, and who will carry that credibility for you into the presentation, because those are the sorts of things that are going to make yours stand out and make it memorable when the judges come back to review what they've looked at. I think it's also, just on that point, it's also something that I've seen a few times now, and it can be very distracting from the judging perspective if your presenter or one of your presenters has a very strong accent, or they talk very quickly, because it's quite difficult for the judges to understand in those circumstances sometimes what's being said. And again, you're sort of squandering the opportunity of having someone talk to the judges through the presentation. So try and make sure that the people that you're getting to present come across well in the presentation, are clear and concise, all the things that colleagues have already mentioned about. And make sure that the quality of what you're recording is good. So make sure that you've invested in a microphone that's of a reasonable standard. Make sure that you've got a good camera hooked up to the computer. Little things, but they're quite easy to overlook. Make sure that the lighting is set up so that people can see you. Because I was involved in a presentation where it wasn't a colleague of mine, someone else who was involved in presenting, it was actually the customer, was sitting in front of an open window. Couldn't see him. It was just a silhouette. Avoid that kind of thing, because it's hugely distracting from the point of view of the panel, and you don't want them distracted. You want them thinking about what you're talking about. And make sure, I suppose, finally, that you are, through your presentation, illustrating the merit of your submission. And you're very clearly going through talking about how your submission meets the criterion of the category that you've entered. As Tim mentioned at the beginning, there are lots of categories to choose from. And part of the art of award submission is choosing the best fit with the category that you go with. So make sure that you spend some time thinking about that, reviewing the criterion for each category, and make sure above all, and I know this sounds so simple, and Heather referred to this as well, that you actually answer the criterion, that you actually address those criterion through the presentation that you're giving, the ones that you're really focusing on, as well as obviously the written presentation that you've done. So I think that's a sort of reasonable summary, hopefully, of those 4 key areas of putting an award submission together. Obviously, this is just a guide, but I'm hoping that you'll find that the information that we've shared with you will be helpful. That will give you a chance to get further in the process. If you've done one of these before, you get further to hopefully winning. If it's your first time in, that you get a good way through the process, and who knows, you might even win. I know the very first awards that I submitted for the company I was working for at the time, when the e-assessment awards first launched, we won 2 categories. So it is possible to win, and I wasn't a judge, by the way.
You were presenting though, weren't you?
I was presenting them, but I wasn't involved in the judging. But it is absolutely possible to win the first time you enter, and many organisations have done so. And as Tim said at the beginning, there is a lot of effort that you have to put into this, but it is definitely worthwhile. If you think that you meet the criterion of the category, that you've got a good chance of illustrating impact in that particular category, then go for it. It's a really rewarding piece to do. And if you don't get through to the end and win, you'll have lots of additional marketing material that you can then use in other ways too. So it's definitely a worthwhile thing to do. I suppose that just to wrap up, one of the things that's worth pointing out is that all 4 of us, as we said in our instructions, work as consultants, and we're all available to help people strengthen their submissions if you want us to, as a consultancy service. Many of us can also help with the presentation side of things as well, and we're all available and contactable through LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to find us. So just search for us on LinkedIn, because we'd be delighted to find ways that we might be able to work with you to help you improve your chances of a successful submission. I think that's that's about it. The last thing that would be is really important to say, in case you haven't come across it already, which I'm sure you have, is the link to the conference website. So the conference website is available here and gives you access both to the information about the conference as that's launched, and that's on the 11th and 12th of June to be held in central London. But it also has a page specifically about the awards with all the award categories and critically descriptions of each of the categories and what it is that the judges are going to be looking for in each of those categories. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much to my three colleagues for all of your wise words and suggestions on how to make a successful submission. And thank you to everyone who's watched this. Good luck, and we look forward to seeing successful submissions come out the other end. Thank you again.
Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, good luck. Thanks,
Thank
Matt.
you.